Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei blames actors linked to the US-Israel for killings of thousands of people during anti-government protests. Ugandan Electoral Commission says President Museveni re-elected to 7th term. Museveni, who's 81, first came to power as a rebel leader in 1986, but since then has won 7 elections. Syrian army declares areas west of Euphrates a closed military zone as forces take control of their Hafar, Maskana and other towns in eastern Aleppo. The Ukrainian delegation heads to the US for talks on security guarantees and a post-war recovery package. President Zelensky says Kyiv needs up to $800 million and hopes to sign key documents at Davos. The White House announces a US-led board of peace to oversee temporary governance in Gaza as deadly violence continues despite a fragile ceasefire. The board includes Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Tony Blair and Jared Kushner, with President Trump serving as chair. Residents say Iran's deadly crackdown has largely quelled protests as state media reports more arrests. President Trump claims Iran halts planned executions, though Tehran makes no official confirmation. Reza Pahlavi calls on the world to help oust Iran's Islamic Republic and target Revolutionary Guard leaders. Iran's security forces appear to have suppressed the nationwide protests after more than 3,000 deaths as per right groups. The U.S. Justice Department investigates Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey over alleged obstruction of ICE operations. The probe follows the fatal shooting of Rennie Good by an ICE agent, which triggered protests in Minneapolis. All right, viewers, we'll now start with top news from Iran, where Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has accused the United States of being behind the recent wave of protests in Iran, calling it an American conspiracy. He suggested that the US is working to swallow Iran and regain control of the country. Khamenei criticized US President Donald Trump's involvement in the unrest, claiming he encouraged the rioters and promised military support. Khamenei also said the protests were a strategy to reassert US military and political domination over Iran, adding that the government must work harder to address economic issues to stabilize the situation.
نبود که شخص رئیس جمهور آمریکا شخص خود او تو این فتنه دخالت کرد، حرف زد، اظهار نظر کرد، تهدید کرد، فتنه‌گران رو تشویق کرد، پیغام داد از آمریکا به این کسانی که حالا بعد خواهم گفت کی بودن که بری جلو نترسید. گفت از شما حمایت میکنیم، حمایت نظامی میکنیم. یعنی خود رئیس جمهور آمریکا وارد فتنه شد، جزء فتنه است. البته وضع اقتصادی وضع خوبی نیست، معیشت مردم حقیقتا مشکل داره، بنده میدونم این رو. باید اونا هم در این زمینه ها بایستی 2 برابر کار کنن برای کارهای اساسی، برای نهادهای دامی، برای ارزاق لازم، برای نیازهای عمومی مردم. مسئولین دولتی باید 2 برابر همیشه کار کنن، با جدیت بیشتری باید کار کنن، در این تردید نیست. اولا ماهیت فتنه این فتنه آمریکایی بود، واضح بود. آمریکایی ها برنامه‌ریزی کردن، فعالیت کردن. هدف آمریکا هم اینو من قاطع صریح با تجربه 40 و چند ساله در جمهوری اسلامی عرض میکنم. هدف آمریکا بلعیدن ایرانه، یعنی ایران رو باز تحت سلطه نظامی خودشون، تحت سلطه سیاسی خودشون تحت سلطه اقتصادی خودشون قرار بدن. هدف اینه.
All right, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, who's former Indian ambassador, joins us from New Delhi in this discussion. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining me. Ambassador, can we take Khamenei's statements on face value? Do you believe that US was indeed, and Israel, or the actors linked to these countries behind the killing of protesters in the anti-government protests?
It's very hard to verify such information, very serious accusation to be made. In the first instance, towards the latter part of his statement in Persian, which I do understand a little bit, and you had explained it, he had said that the government needs to work much harder to resolve economic issues. He's right on that. In the first instance, the protests were spontaneous because of the downfall of the Iranian currency, the shortage of food inflation, the huge water crisis in Tehran, etc. These were issues which are primarily to do with good governance, which was lacking. After that, as often happens in demonstrations all over the world, they can get infiltrated by those who want to give it a certain twist or turn. That is impossible to verify sitting in Delhi or outside Iran as to what happened. But as far as the killing of protesters are concerned, there are many videos that have come out which indicate that security forces were shooting to kill. Usually, in a country based on rule of law, like for instance in India, if the security force is to fire, they have to first give 3 warnings on a loudspeaker. And if they have to fire, they don't fire to kill, they fire down towards the feet to keep the crowd at bay. That is the correct way under rule of law, whether in the West or in India, to handle a mob that is becoming violent and could actually itself wreak violence upon the security forces. That is how security forces manage violent mobs. And in our case, for instance, we are a huge country with a huge population, 1.4 billion people. How many Indians have we heard of being shot dead in a protest? There are protests always. That's normal in a democracy. You have the right to protest about what you feel is wrong, and the security forces have to handle it so that law and order is not disturbed in the rest of the city. In this particular case, he is saying that Trump instigated or had the protesters shot dead. What Trump certainly did, which in my opinion was very Trumpian, if I may use that word, it's not correct English, but now everybody uses the word Trumpian.
Yeah.
A very Trumpian thing he did was to tell the Iranians, help is coming, telling the Iranian government, don't you dare execute. It's because of what he said. They were not executed. I'm happy he said that. There was a young 27-year-old man who was supposed to have been executed yesterday. I do hope and pray that because of what Trump said, he's not been executed. If he has been able to stop the execution, that's one good thing he's done. As far as the rest is concerned, telling people help is coming, etc., to me, coming from India, I would call it gross interference in the internal affairs of a nation. But that's part of Trump's policy. The only interference he does not like is anybody telling America what to do. He has the supreme right, as the sole power of the world, to tell others what to do. It reminds me of colonial times in India, where only the Brits knew what is best for India. Indians have never had the right to know what is good for India. So this reminds me of colonial times. But what he doesn't say is that the countries which had American bases close to Iran, when Iran said that if these attacks come on Iran from these bases, Iran has the right to attack those bases. They then told Trump, we are not going to allow your American bases on our soil to attack Iran. So in a way, what Trump has done, in a very Trumpian way, is he has unified the Shia and the Sunni world. That the Sunnis are telling Americans, don't use your base from our country to attack Shia Iran. So in a way, he has in a way been able to unite the Islamic world, something which was considered impossible to do for the last 300 years. I actually think, for the moment, he has backed off. He has too much on his plate, and he probably first wants to annex this poor little Greenland large country, I'm told, just little smaller than India, with a population of, I'm told, about 550,000, which would probably fit into a small little corner of the locality in South Delhi where I live in, 1.4 billion people. And I think he first wants to finish off with Iceland. So he is Greenland, because I think that is more important for him for the moment, having been able to successfully bully the Iranian leadership to not execute, which, as I say, Christy, that is something I thank President Trump. If he has stopped young people from being hanged and executed.
Ambassador, what do you see next for Khamenei now? Because he clearly cannot sit in his veranda anymore and enjoy like he had been for all these years since '79. He's now a marked man. What's your...
He's not sitting, Christy, he's never sitting in his balcony. For the last 1 year, he's been sitting inside a bunker.
Yeah.
And President Trump, at the last Iran crisis, if you remember, he said, I know exactly where these people are sitting. I know where Khamenei is sitting. I have spared him this time. So don't ever think that, like you or me or our colleague, fellow panelists, that he is safe sitting in the veranda. He is not safe even in his bunker. So what are you talking about veranda? Not safe at all.
What's next for him, Ambassador? What's next for Khamenei?
I think unfortunately, in many countries, there's no retirement age for leaders. There should actually be a retirement age. I think he's over 80, if I'm not mistaken. Must be. He's been around for a long time. I think he should just retire and go back to what they do, I don't know, religious meditation or whatever. And he should allow the young people of Iran...
86. Yeah.
86. So he should allow young people, preferably, in my opinion, 45 plus, build up the young leadership, have a participative democracy, and allow the young people of Iran to decide in which direction they should go, particularly on development, on food. It's a rich nation with resources, and why are they so badly off, etc. And let's not forget one important thing, Christy, which is that unlike Talibanized Afghanistan, and despite the hijab, women were always allowed higher education. Even in the worst of times, you have women lawyers, women doctors, etc. So a little bit of push for women's rights at the same time would be nice for people like me who are strong feminists. But I have to acknowledge that in even worst of times, they were never prevented from higher education as the Taliban had done in Afghanistan. To that extent, I would say that a Shiite regime is more liberal than some Sunni regimes that have done this.
All right.
So let's see what happens, but I think it's time for him to retire before they catch him in that bunker. And that would be a nice end.
Well, we hope he can hear you. But thanks very much, Ambassador, for joining me in this discussion. We have some breaking news now coming in, viewers, from Indonesia, where an ATR 42-500 aircraft has gone missing near Makassar on a mountain close to where the contact with the plane was lost, according to flight tracking data. ATR specialists are completely engaged and providing extensive support in the investigation conducted by the Indonesian authorities. They are working closely with the local investigative teams to gather, analyze and interpret relevant evidence. However, ATR has been informed that an accident indeed occurred in Indonesia involving an ATR 42-500, and it said that first thoughts are with all the individuals affected by the accident. The ATR specialists are fully engaged to support both the investigation led by the Indonesian authorities and the operator. Breaking news now coming in, viewers, from Indonesia. All right, with that, we are now going to proceed. Now, protesters have gathered in Copenhagen to show support for Greenland amid US President Donald Trump's threats to seize the Arctic territory. Demonstrators waved Greenlandic flags and chanted slogans like "Hands off Greenland" and "Greenland for Greenlanders." The protests coincided with a visit from US lawmakers who met with Danish and Greenlandic officials, promising congressional support and trying to lower the temperature in the region. Trump has called Greenland vital to US security, citing its strategic location and mineral resources and has not ruled out the use of force to seize it. European nations have sent military personnel to the island at Denmark's request. Trump first proposed acquiring Greenland in 2019, but his plan has faced opposition, including from his own party in Washington. Professor Rohan Gunratna, international affairs expert, joins me in this discussion. Professor, thank you very much for joining. Of course, we're seeing protests now in different parts of the world. There was a huge crowd that had gathered in Germany against Trump's acquisition bid. European leaders have also sent in their troops to Greenland. Congressional delegation has also spoken out. Do you think this is going to temper down Trump's aggression as far as Greenland is concerned, at least for the time being?
Riti, it's very difficult for Trump to move forward with his plans because the US Congress, not only Democrats but also the Republicans, most of the Republicans are not with Trump when it comes to his plans to take over Greenland. But Trump is very theatrical. He is very performative. So I personally think that there has come a point where there's very little support for him to do that. Certainly it's going to disrupt the US alliance with Europe, the NATO alliance, and it's also going to be a huge challenge for the European countries because the NATO will not have enough support to protect Ukraine. So Trump moving ahead with his plans to take over Greenland is something that is going to disrupt that old and close friendship with the Europeans. So I believe that he will not go ahead with this plan because his advisors will tell him that it is going to be contrary to American interests.
And his approval ratings have also come very, badly. Do you think that's also one of the factors?
Yes, absolutely, you are correct. But I want to tell you that within the United States, there is the support for Trump taking over Greenland is diminishing very rapidly. So I think the Americans are also against this move, and eventually Trump will not move forward.
Okay, sure. I don't know if I discussed this with you earlier or not, but Professor, would you say if he's given limited rights to the resources and some access to, Greenland and to have his military presence there, that's going to satisfy Trump's obsession with the resource-rich island?
Yes, certainly the Europeans have agreed to have a greater participation of the Americans in Greenland so that they can do the monitoring of what is happening in the Arctic. The American troops will work with the Europeans even more closely. At this point, there's a very small American presence in Greenland that is likely to expand. And of course, more European troops will be based in Greenland. And I believe that this debate and discussion will lead to something good. There is a threat, as Trump mentions, from the Chinese and Russian interest in the Arctic. But I believe that if Trump goes ahead with this plan, certainly the Russian and the Chinese influence will grow and expand, and the American and the European influence will only diminish.
All right, Professor, thank you for your comments. Do stay on with me as we proceed. Because Donald Trump's administration has been in discussion with Venezuela's hardline Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello months before the U.S. operations to seize former President Nicolas Maduro. The Trump administration has warned Cabello against using the security services or militant ruling party supporters he oversees to target the country's opposition, as the security apparatus, which includes the intelligence services, police and the armed forces, remains largely intact after the January 3 U.S. raid. Cabello has been named in the U.S. drug trafficking indictment that the Trump administration used as a justification to arrest Maduro, but was not taken as part of the operation. The communication with Cabello, which also addressed the sanctions imposed by the U.S. and the indictment that he faces, began in the early days of the current Trump administration and continued in the weeks leading up to the U.S. ouster of Maduro. The administration has also been in touch with Cabello since Maduro's ouster. Professor Rohan Gunratna requested to join us back in the discussion here. It's very difficult to assess what's really going on with the Trump administration and the interim leadership in Venezuela, and even the opposition leaders have also managed to flee. Then there's Machado, who's offered a Nobel Peace Prize, again becoming favorites with Trump. And then there's Rodriguez, who's carrying on with her interim leadership as the president. All this while Trump has said that he is the acting president. So please do give our viewers an understanding of how this negotiation is going as of now.
Firstly, Trump is very triumphant and very theatrical. But at the same time, he can be very serious. So Trump said he is going to bring Maduro, and he has done that. Of course, it is based on a US indictment where the former president of Venezuela was charged with drug trafficking. I have reviewed the indictment, and in that indictment, there's a reference to Cabello, who is the current, the incumbent interior minister. But the Americans did not snatch the interior minister because the Americans had a deal with him. And today there is the law and order, and the military and the intelligence services are under the control of the interior minister. So the Americans have in fact had an agreement with him. It could be an unwritten agreement. We will not bring you to the United States and we will not prosecute you, but you must make sure that the law and order situation is maintained in Venezuela. And I think he has done that. So the Americans planned very clearly, very well throughout November and December to ensure that Cabello did not side with Maduro, and also that once Maduro was taken to the United States, that Cabello, the interior minister, maintained a sense of stability and security in Venezuela.
Okay. Professor, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for your comments and for joining us. With that, viewers, we now proceed to cover some news from Syria, where Syrian government forces have taken control of 34 towns in East Aleppo, including Deir Hafr and Maskana, after the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces withdrew from the area. However, this follows deadly clashes last week, which led to the deployment of Syrian reinforcements and the SDF's evacuation east of the Euphrates River. Meanwhile, Syria claims to have secured the withdrawal of over 200 SDF fighters. Clashes and accusations of violations persist. In a significant development, Syria has also recognized Kurdish as a national language in a gesture of goodwill, though it remains short of full Kurdish aspirations. Let's listen in to what the residents there have said.
ما فرحنا مثل الفرح هذا. كانت حياتنا كلها مخاوف. يعني ما نقدر نتحرك، بالليل معدم الحركة عندنا نهائيا. اليوم الحمد لله فوت الأمن الداخلي، فوت الجيش علينا، وجوه العالم تغيرت. الله أنعم علينا بهالنصر هذا، ألف الحمد لله. عندنا أطفالنا اليوم صار لهم سنة و3 أشهر لا يروح على المدرسة ولا رجعة، خوف وتعليم ما بيعدنا.
Alright, as always, we'll end the bulletin with some technology news coming in. Now, OpenAI has said that it would start showing ads in ChatGPT to some US users, ramping up efforts to generate revenue from both AI chatbot to fund the high costs of developing the technology. The ads will be tested with users on the company's free tier and the lower priced Go plan that is now expanding globally. The ads will show up in the coming weeks and will be separate from the answers generated by ChatGPT. Users on the more expensive Plus, Pro, Business and Enterprise tiers will not have ads. OpenAI also said that advertising would not influence ChatGPT's outputs and that user conversations would not be shared with marketers. The move marks a major departure for the company that had so far relied on subscriptions. It shows the pressure OpenAI faces to increase revenue as it spends heavily on data centers and prepares for a widely anticipated IPO. OpenAI said it would not show ads to users under 18. The company also plans to block ads from appearing in relation to sensitive topics such as health and politics. And that's all we have time for. Do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.